Only my son is fit to take over the company. Daughters are just a hindrance, she said. If it's a son, he can inherit the company and I can remain the president's wife. So, she's implying that the daughter is in the way. Both grandchildren are equally precious to me. The way my son's wife treats them is simply unacceptable, and I can't entrust the company to someone like that. It seems she's mistaken and needs to be taught a lesson. I'm Jessica. At aita, I've spent years managing the accounting for my husband David's company. We met through a family introduction back when he was just a regular employee. He worked tirelessly for the company, always thinking about work even after coming home. I would watch him at home pondering over the next business idea or planning for client meetings. Seeing him like that made me wonder about the hardships of being an employee and what I could do to support him as his wife. At that time, the company was a small business started as a hobby, dealing in imported goods, where David worked in sales and office management. Being a small business, it was always short-staffed. David was constantly busy running here and there and doing office work at home. We couldn't find the right time to marry due to his business schedule, but then a relative introduced me to him. When I met him, I found him to be honest and sincere, and I could sense his good nature from his words. I felt he was someone who would cherish what's important to him. Trusting my intuition, I started dating him following the introduction, and we eventually got married. For a while after our marriage, he continued as a regular employee, leaving early and returning late from work. I understood he loved his job and the company needed him, but as a newlywed, I felt a bit lonely. Then, something happened that completely overshadowed my loneliness. To my surprise, David was promoted to be the next president of the company. Why was my husband, a recently married, ordinary employee, suddenly made president? I was astonished, but more so was David. Despite his confusion and without much concern for our worries, the president quickly handed over the reins and stepped down. I later learned that the president had been in poor health and could have retired any time. He had always prioritized work over personal life, had no spouse or children, and felt it would be a shame to let the company he started and nurtured disappear. So he chose my husband, whom he trusted to take over. David was chosen because he was earnest, straightforward, good at his job, and trusted by clients. Despite having no experience in management, he suddenly became the president. As David adjusted to running the company, I, who had been a housewife since our marriage, started handling the office and accounting work to support him. I had no experience in these areas, but I wanted to help him in any way I could. Taking over the company on the spur of the moment was challenging, with many firsts for both of us. But we were determined to make it work. Despite the demands of running the business, we were blessed with children and led fulfilling lives. Before we knew it, we had grown older. I am now 80 and David is 78. Most people our age have retired and are enjoying their leisure years. However, our company, thanks to David's hard work and customer trust, has expanded far beyond what it was when we took over. For a small privately owned business, it has become a well-known corporation in the industry. We have started to think about passing it on to the next generation. It's a company we've cherished and nurtured with great care. The successor cannot be just anyone. Just as the former president entrusted the company to my husband, we too want to leave this nurtured company to someone who can be trusted to do the job well. Typically, one would pass the business to their children. Fortunately, we have a son who also has children. If we entrust the company to our son, it will provide more options for future succession. That's what I was thinking. However, this was just a possibility we were considering, not a fixed decision. We have always tried not to interfere too much in our son's life. Both he and we are independent individuals, and with our own families, it would be problematic if parents-in-law interfered too much. Having had my own difficulties with my mother-in-law when I was younger, I strongly wished not to cause such troubles for my son and his wife. Our relationship with our eldest son is good, but we maintain a balanced distance. However, things changed when we received news of our grandson's birth. Stacy, our son's wife, asked us not to contact them as they were busy with childcare. So, we decided to just watch over them without interfering. Then, one day in December, we received an unexpected invitation from Stacy. "I'd like you and David to spend a relaxed year-end at our house. There are several things I want to discuss," she said. Since we hadn't received many invitations from her before, we were surprised but pleased. We had been busy with work recently and hadn't had much time to relax, so we accepted the invitation, looking forward to a leisurely time and a good chat. "Thank you for inviting us for the year-end," I said as we entered. "No problem. We've been quite busy, so sorry for the timing," they replied. When we arrived at our eldest son's house, I noticed trophies and children's photos, but something seemed off. I remembered a Christmas card from about 20 years ago with a girl's name, yet there was nothing related to a girl. Thinking back, we had minimal interaction with my eldest son's family. We used to meet for tea or accept their homecoming visits before they had children, but that stopped after we heard they had a child. Assuming they were overwhelmed with parenting, I refrained from reaching out too much. I had offered help a few times initially, but Stacy, my son's wife, firmly refused. Over the phone, she snapped, "This child needs me, not Jessica. Please don't call again. It might wake the baby." Since then, feeling apologetic, we stopped contacting them. That's why their invitation was a pleasant surprise, despite the unsettling elements. The house was filled with trophies with Steve written on them, and Stacy talked non-stop about this Steve, presumably a boy. While serving tea, she bragged. Continuing over drinks, she bragged. After the boasting, she brought out an album for us to admire. I might be misremembering, but I thought a girl was born first. Did Steve come after her? I asked. Stacy's face soured as she bitterly said, the girl, Laura. She's nothing like Steve. Never brought home a single trophy. But Laura must have her strengths," I said, though I had never met her. "Steve is different, truly exceptional. Considering his future, I want to give him the best education," Stacy continued. Her words about Laura were sharp and critical. I've heard women can be harsh on their daughters, but the disparity in her attitude towards her son and daughter was stark. Having only seen them in photos, I couldn't say much more, but listening to her made me increasingly uncomfortable. However, wanting to avoid spoiling the mood, I nodded along to her boasts. That evening, to celebrate our long-awaited reunion, my eldest son and his wife served us lobster, accompanied by 4 bottles of wine. The luxurious lobster seemed an extravagant pairing with so much wine for just 4 adults. My son isn't much of a drinker, so perhaps Stacy enjoys wine, I thought, and asked about it. "These wines seem perfect for the lobster. They're from a renowned winery, aren't they?" "Stacy, you must like wine." "More than liking wine, I wanted David and Jessica to enjoy it. These are special bottles," she said, handing us wine glasses. As we progressed with the lobster and wine, Stacy abruptly asked, "Your house where you live now, it's quite magnificent. Must have been expensive, right?" While she pressed on, my husband skillfully dodged her probing. "Well, I don't think it's worth that much. How much was it? It's been so long, I've forgotten," he replied. Stacy's face briefly hardened when she didn't get the response she expected, but she quickly recovered and poured us more wine. She then began inquiring about our current assets and the value of our properties in detail. It seemed she was trying to get us drunk and make us reveal the worth of our possessions. Her persistence was starting to make me uncomfortable, especially as the wine bottles were nearly empty. I have a high tolerance for alcohol, having once enjoyed wine alone in my younger days. But I'm older now and have been moderating my intake for health reasons. I'm sorry, Stacy, but I think I'll call it a night. We have tomorrow to think about. David, what about you?
Yeah, I think I'll rest soon too. Oh, I wanted to buy something from the nearby grocery store. I'll go there first.
As we stood up to leave, I heard a voice from behind. It was just a little more. They seemed desperate to learn about our company and assets for some reason. As I was getting ready to rest, my husband, who was supposed to have gone to the grocery store, stopped me and quietly pulled me along. Following him, I saw a figure on the balcony. I almost exclaimed, but upon closer inspection, it seemed to be a younger woman, engrossed in eating bread. Bread on the balcony. It seemed strange, but looking closer, she somewhat resembled our eldest son's wife. She was probably the troublesome daughter they had talked about. Still, why was she devouring bread and hiding at night? Eating bread alone on the balcony at this hour? What's going on, Laura?
It's nothing unusual. Just the usual. I was supposed to give her my earnings for the month, but I'm tired of it and going to bed.
She might have been told to hand over a part of her earnings as living expenses, which seemed quite substantial for a girl her age to earn and bring home. She fluttered a bank envelope in silence, her expression carrying an air of something not being right. Our granddaughter, unconcerned about us, entered a room at the back. The door wasn't fully closed, and I could see inside. It seemed she had crawled into a closet and fallen asleep. The room, cluttered with golf clubs, kitchen appliances, old furniture, and seemingly broken bags, looked more like a storage room than a bedroom. It was unlikely that our granddaughter, around 20, was into golf or collecting old furniture. She must be using this storage room as her bedroom. During our visit, my son's wife had only bragged about her son, boasting about his talents and intelligence, and the money invested in his potential. Meanwhile, her daughter was being treated this way, which was unbelievable. My husband was also stunned by what was unfolding before us. The disparity in treatment towards their own children, especially the disdainful attitude towards our granddaughter, was unacceptable. After a while, my husband, seemingly troubled, retreated to the bedroom. Later, I realized he was contemplating something significant, likely to impact my eldest son and his wife. In the middle of the night, I woke up, uneasy on an unfamiliar pillow. It was 2 a.m., and I heard voices. It sounded like a one-sided argument, and it turned out to be my son's wife scolding our granddaughter, upset that she had interacted with us earlier.
Why are you talking to those old people? You're supposed to be non-existent in this house, stirring up unnecessary trouble.
I hear such things. Ignoring her reference to us as old, I was puzzled why our granddaughter was considered non-existent in the house. The mother's tirade against her daughter continued until just before dawn. Feeling sorry for my granddaughter having to endure those harsh words all night, daybreak finally arrived. Wondering if she had gotten any sleep, my concern grew. Unaware that we had witnessed their treatment of our granddaughter, my son and his wife approached us casually in the morning.
Good morning, David. Have you started thinking about the next generation for the company?
She asked.
Well, yes. It's a precious company that I took over from the president and nurtured. I want to entrust it to someone with a promising future.
My husband replied. I noticed my son's wife trying to suppress a smile. Indeed, a company we've carefully protected and nurtured. We want to leave it to someone who values the company and its employees. I added.
That's right. We want someone who can cherish and value the people they work with, ensuring the company's longevity.
My husband agreed. Our eldest son, John, nodded emphatically and suddenly started pitching himself.
With Dad and Mom getting older, I've been thinking it's time for you to not overdo things. I've been studying management in between work, and while I may not be the same as Dad, I believe I can run the company. Besides, we have our proud son, Steve. With him, the company's stability is assured for at least 2 generations.
He continued. Their tone suggested they already considered taking over the company, a done deal. Neither my husband nor I had said anything about handing over the company to them, but in their minds, they seemed to already be living as the president and his wife. My husband spoke calmly.
When that time comes, we'll discuss it formally. It's about the company's future after all. We can't just make promises like this in a family conversation.
Right. I got a bit ahead of myself, excited about my husband and Steve shining in the company, Stacy added. They clearly thought the company's inheritance was settled, but we had already conveyed our criteria for a suitable successor. I wondered how they would react when they knew the truth. Later, I asked John and his wife to come to our house. Unlike before, when they often didn't respond, they replied immediately this time, eager to come over. Stacy asked excitedly over the phone,
Thank you for calling, Jessica.
You're inviting us over, so it's about the matter we discussed earlier, right? A significant day for our family. Should we dress formally?
Just come as usual.
We'll be waiting, I replied. On the promised day, they arrived at our house and started causing a scene.
What's this, Mom? What are you playing at?
John exclaimed.
Jessica, this joke has gone too far.
There's nothing here, Stacy added. The site where our house used to be was now just an empty lot. We had demolished the house. A detail not yet shared with John and his wife, and they were visibly shocked.
I thought the agreement was that I would take over the company and the house. This isn't what we were promised. Why is the house gone?
John demanded. Promised? You taking over the company and the house? When did we ever say that? I questioned. At my response, they trembled with anger. Then, seemingly struck by an idea, Stacy's tone shifted. I understand now. You demolished the house and prepared this land so we can build our own, with all our personal touches. That's so thoughtful of you, she said. Yes, buying a house is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. It's important to incorporate your preferences, I agreed. Seizing the moment, Stacy, clearly with inheritance in mind, moved closer. They still seem to interpret things in a way that suits them, but it's about time we confronted them with reality. We can't accept such a grand piece of land from David and Jessica for free. We'll help out around the house in the future. Being family, we can assist, and I'm a housewife after all, she offered. Maybe we should take you up on that, Stacy. Could you fill out this document for me? I asked, handing over a single piece of paper. What's this? Renouncing inheritance? What do you mean? She asked, confused. It means exactly that. You both lack the ability and character to take over and run the company, I clarified. With that clear message, John and Stacy turned red with fury, looking as though they might lash out at any moment. How can you say that? John is self-studying business management and sales while working at his current job. And with our brilliant son Steve, taking over would ensure a secure future. You still don't understand. Knowledge alone isn't enough to run a company. And just being a man doesn't guarantee a top position in today's world. In fact, years ago, John had come to the family home several times, claiming he wanted to help and study business management. Although sporadic, my husband was pleased to accept his offer, but it turned out John wasn't sincerely studying. Firstly, John, you came to the company wanting to study business management, but your real motive wasn't to study but to embezzle company funds.
What are you saying, Mom? That's a terrible accusation.
Do you think I've been managing the company's finances for years without knowing? The numbers don't lie. I've known for a while that you've been secretly using the company's money." Despite this, he still seemed to think he could deceive us, maintaining his composure.
Come on, numbers not adding up? And even if I did have that money, what would I do with it?
Sarah, that's the name of the woman you were involved with at the club. Weren't you courting her, saying you'd make her the president's wife when you become the president? The timing and amount of embezzlement match perfectly with your expenditures on her. John turned pale as I relayed this information, sourced from my husband's contacts.
What's that supposed to mean? My private life is my own business. What's the problem with that?
The problem is everything. Embezzling company funds for club visits and affairs? What about that suggests a fit character to lead? Don't make me laugh. His wife, besides him, turned red with anger, visibly hurt by the infidelity. However, she was not one to give up easily.
I never thought John would cheat and misuse your father's company money. We'll get a divorce. But Steve, carrying David's blood is different. He's brilliant and will someday carry the company. Just wait until then.
John's wife seemed blindly convinced of her son's excellence, muttering about the trophies and competitions Steve had won. Yes, your pride and joy, Steve. He's been visiting us, did you know?
Well, I think he mentioned a few times about visiting Grandma. What about it?
As a mother, you don't seem to know what your son is up to. Look at this. I showed her the screen of a flea market app. All these brooches, necklaces, and watches listed here are mine. They started disappearing after Steve began visiting our house. This is what's happening.
Stop making baseless accusations. Where's the proof on the site that it's Steve?
The profile had a plain icon and a nondescript bio. Indeed, without more evidence, it could seem like I was harassing my son, his wife, and their child. But I have irrefutable evidence. Look at this bag listed for sale. The damage, the logo, is the same as the one in Steve's album he showed at our house. Don't you recognize it? As I explained this, John's wife shook, confronted her with her husband's and son's misdeeds. However, we couldn't let this go. Even though it's a family matter, it's still a crime. We could take this to the police for investigation. If everything is returned properly, we might not need to take it further. What will you do?
I haven't embezzled any money from the company.
John still seemed intent on denying his actions, probably thinking we wouldn't report family to the police. All right, that's your response. But remember, it's too late for regrets.
I've been listening quietly, but I can't accept the way you've been raising your children, showing favoritism to one and treating the other terribly. Both are my beloved grandchildren, yet such treatment is appalling. A leader who can run a company needs to be trusted by everyone, or it will collapse easily.
Treated terribly? I was only trying to raise a successor worthy of David's company.
Don't joke. Raising a successor, you're just teaching children to act immorally. Later, we reported John's embezzlement to the police. A week after the police investigated, uncovering his misdeeds, further investigation revealed more crimes, with police officers frequently visiting their home, attracting neighborhood gossip. Meanwhile, John's son, who had been bragged about as the future company heir, was already disliked in school and the neighborhood. With the scandal, people distanced themselves even more from them. They had no one to turn to, left alone to deal with the consequences of their greed and vanity. As for us, we sold the cleared land and moved into a retirement home, enjoying interactions with peers. With financial security, we decided to help our granddaughter, who had been sleeping in the closet, live independently. She wasn't previously allowed to move out, but now had a chance to break away and thrive. Surprisingly, she sees us as benefactors who helped her turn her life around. She often visits us at the retirement home and we've grown close. We hope to continue living peacefully, not swayed by money or superficial affection.